The city skyline shimmered like a crown of broken promises. Imani Rhodes never imagined the man she loved would break her heart in front of an entire ballroom. She had ignored the warning signs, missed calls, late meetings, shallow praise, but tonight, the truth would cut deeper than expected. The rooftop ballroom of the Gold Leaf Hotel in downtown Atlanta pulsed with soft jazz and soft lighting, casting a warm gold over sequined gowns and tailored suits. Imani, a 29-year-old black chef with deep brown skin and a quiet elegance, stood near a floor-to-ceiling window, her crimson dress flowing like a second skin. Her natural curls were swept into a careful updo, and at her ear a small, fire-shaped earring, gifted by her grandmother, sparked beneath the chandelier light. She didn't belong to this world, not really. She belonged in kitchens with clattering pans and the hum of spice in the air. But she had come tonight for Darius. Darius Langston, 32, was a music producer with sharp suits and an even sharper trajectory. He'd once whispered to Imani over late-night takeout that he'd build an empire, and she'd be his queen. "This is our world now, babe," he had told her, bourbon in hand and ambition in his smile. And so tonight, she wore the red dress. She told herself that tonight would be the beginning of their forever. The music softened, and the crowd's chatter dropped to a hush. Darius stepped onto the small stage at the room's center, his smile gleaming under the lights. He held the mic like he owned the room. Imani felt her breath catch. This was it. This had to be it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Darius began, his voice velvet smooth. "Tonight is not just about music. Tonight is about truth." Her hands tightened around the clutch bag, the tiny zipper biting into her palm. She dared to believe. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind, "Cook with your soul, child. Let no one dim your fire." Then Celeste Hart stepped into the spotlight beside him. Celeste was 23, a rising pop singer with platinum blonde waves cascading over a sparkling silver dress. She draped herself around Darius's arm like she'd always belonged there. Imani's heart stilled. Her mouth went dry. Darius smiled at Celeste, then looked out at the crowd. "For years I've been held back, tethered by the past. But sometimes you have to let go of what grounds you to fly." He turned toward Imani across the room. "Imani, you were my anchor." But anchors don't rise. There were gasps. Whispers cut through the ballroom like glass underfoot. Someone nearby dropped a champagne flute. Imani didn't move. Darius continued. "I'm choosing someone who shines, someone who knows what it means to soar. Celeste is my future." The crowd broke into awkward applause. Celeste raised her glass, her smirk slicing through the silence. "Stick to your little kitchen, sweetheart," she added with a laugh. Laughter rippled from the edges of the room. Imani's cheeks burned, but she stood tall. Her spine refused to bow. The earring at her ear burned like a tiny flame, reminding her she was more than this moment. From somewhere in the crowd, a voice rang out. "You're a fool, Darius." It was Talia Green's voice, Imani's best friend. But Imani didn't need saving. Not now. She was done being someone's background. She walked forward, not toward Darius, but through him, through the image of who he had been to her. "You think you know me," she said, her voice calm and clear, the hush in the room wrapping around each word. "You'll see who I really am." And then she turned. Her dress swirled like smoke as she walked away. The chandeliers above caught in the movement, glinting like stars. Whispers followed her, but she didn't falter. Darius's smirk flickered, and even Celeste's laughter wavered. Outside, Atlanta's night air pressed close and humid. Imani's heels clicked across the sidewalk. She flagged down a cab, her fingers trembling as she climbed in. The driver glanced at her in the mirror, his voice gentle. "Rough night." She managed a small smile, though her eyes shimmered. Just the beginning. The cab pulled away, the party's golden lights fading in the glass. Imani rested her hand on her earring, the fire shape warm against her skin. In that small flicker, in that quiet burn, something new began. 3 months later, Beaufort smelled like rain and old stories. Imani Rhodes stepped out of the Greyhound bus with a duffel bag, a box of cooking knives, and her grandmother's worn recipe book tucked under her arm. Her crimson dress had been replaced with jeans and sneakers, her curls pulled into a no-nonsense bun. She was still the same 29-year-old black woman who had stood in that glittering Atlanta ballroom, but something inside her had shifted. She didn't come to this sleepy South Carolina town to be seen. She came to build something that couldn't be taken away. The burn from Atlanta still ached, but the quiet streets of Beaufort whispered possibility. The town was slow in a way she hadn't known before, shopkeepers greeting each other by name, porches lined with wind chimes, salt from the sea clinging to the air. It was the kind of place where change was eyed with suspicion, where strangers earned trust slowly. But for Imani, it felt like a blank page. She had no expectations now, just a dream she wasn't ready to give up on. Her goal was simple: open a restaurant that honored her roots. Not a flashy place with cocktails named after celebrities, but something soulful. A space where food told stories, where spices remembered things people had forgotten. She found the space on her second day, an old brick storefront 2 blocks from the waterfront. The windows were dusty, the sign half peeled, but when she stepped inside, she could already hear the sound of laughter and clinking forks. The space needed work, but it had bones, and bones could be rebuilt. Imani moved in above the restaurant. The upstairs apartment was small, 1-room, creaky floors, the kind of place where you could hear the rain tapping every corner of the roof. But it was hers. She spent her mornings scrubbing walls, her afternoons painting, and her nights sanding down countertops. She added touches of herself wherever she could. A string of warm fairy lights over the register, potted basil on the windowsill, and a mural she painted by hand late one night, an orange flame that curled across the main wall like it had a heartbeat. She named the restaurant Soul Fire. Locals noticed, of course. The woman with the Atlanta license plate and dark skin they hadn't seen before. Some were polite but distant. A few offered cautious smiles and others simply stared. Beaufort wasn't unfriendly, just careful. And Imani understood that. Trust takes time, especially for someone who looked like her and wanted to change something. Her first day open, she cooked 3 dishes: jollof risotto with okra crisps, peanut stew over jasmine rice, and honey-roasted yam tarts. She lit a single lantern above the entrance, printed menus by hand, and waited. 2 people came in. One was a UPS driver who ordered to go. The other was a young couple who left after reading the menu too long. She kept cooking. Every day before sunrise, she rolled out dough, sliced onions, boiled stock. She played old jazz on a scratched speaker and wore her grandmother's apron. By week 2, her savings were dwindling. She gave up meat for herself, ate rice and beans from the back pot, and showered with the hot water turned low. One night, the oven broke. The repair cost more than she had, so she took her engagement ring, once a glittering promise, and sold it at a pawn shop 3 towns over. She didn't look back. The town whispered, "She's nice, but she won't last." Another city dreamer. Too much spice. She heard them all, but she also remembered her grandmother's voice. Don't ask the world for permission to be yourself. Late one night, after a long day with no customers, Imani sat alone in the kitchen. Rain tapped the window like a slow metronome. Her hands, still dusted with flour, flipped through the old recipe book. Tucked inside was a letter she hadn't noticed before, faded handwriting in slanted lines. Cook with your soul, child, and your fire will light the world. Imani pressed the letter to her chest, eyes closed. I'm trying, Nana, she whispered. Just then, headlights splashed across the front window. She stood quickly, peeking through the curtain. A couple stood outside their umbrella, sagging in the rain, reading the hand-painted sign. Her heart thudded. She grabbed a towel, wiped her hands, and unlocked the door. Please, she thought, just one chance. The kitchen lights flickered, but Imani Rhodes's hands stayed steady. The blade of her knife moved in clean, practiced strokes through sweet potatoes as the scent of ginger simmered in the air. Rain pattered steadily against the front windows of Soulfire, and outside the streetlights reflected off slick pavement like gold trapped under glass. The coastal town of Beaufort, South Carolina, had turned gray with the storm, but inside the little restaurant, the warmth of spice and flame still held. The town's doubt hadn't disappeared. Business had picked up slightly after the blog post, but it was still inconsistent: 3 tables at lunch, none at dinner. And now something uglier had arrived. It began with one comment under a food blog repost. Funny how a nobody chef from Atlanta just happens to get a viral review. Then came more. She bought it. I heard she paid the critic. Fake buzz. The words clawed at Imani's chest every time she opened her phone. She tried to brush them off, but it wasn't just words. That morning, a woman in a grocery aisle had stared at her a second too long. A man muttered something as he passed her on the sidewalk. The town that once ignored her now looked at her with suspicion. She was a black woman with bold flavors, a big vision, and a fire she refused to dim, and not everyone liked that. She nearly closed early that night. The stew pot was only half full, and her shoulders ached. She'd already wiped down every counter, straightened every fork, and still the silence pressed in. Then the door burst open with a gust of wind, and in came Talia Green, cheeks flushed rain, dripping off her hoodie arms full of a woven basket. I brought backup, she announced, dropping the basket onto the prep counter. The scent of fresh-baked cornbread hit Imani like a hug. Talia Imani stared, startled. What are you doing here? Talia peeled off her soaked hoodie, revealing a flour-dusted Soul Train t-shirt and her familiar grin. You think I'd let some trolls bury your fire, girl, please? She turned serious, reaching into her tote bag and pulling out her phone. Have you seen the comments? Imani nodded. Too many. Well, Talia said, scrolling quickly, I have something better. She held out the screen, revealing a blog titled Soulfire, a coastal gem that feeds the soul. The post was written in warm, glowing language, praising Imani's jollof risotto as a love letter in every bite, and calling the restaurant a sanctuary of flavor, memory, and light. Imani's throat tightened. Wait, this is the same blog that started everything. Talia smiled, eyes soft. I sent your menu to my friend Elliot. He's a food writer, low-key but respected. I asked him to come without saying a word to you. You did that, Imani whispered, the tears already coming. Always will, Talia said, reaching across the counter. You were the one who sat with me at 2 a.m. when I almost gave up on my bakery. This is just the return. They sat down together at the small table near the window, rain tapping steadily outside. Imani ladled them both bowls of stew, and for the first time in weeks her laughter returned, soft and cautious like a candle rekindling. Later, after Talia had gone upstairs to crash in the guest room, Imani stood alone at the window. The blog had gone viral. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Photos were being shared. Locals were commenting, supportive ones this time. Didn't know we had something like this in Beaufort. Gonna try it this weekend. My wife can't stop talking about that peanut stew. Then she saw them. Outside under the restaurant awning, a small group of umbrellas stood in the rain, 3 people, then 5, then more, waiting in the dark for her food. She turned the sign on the door from closed to open and whispered, "Let them in." They called her a fraud. Then her seafood supplier bailed. But Imani didn't come this far to fold now. The blog post had sparked a wave of attention, both welcome and sharp-edged. Soulfire's phone rang, more tables filled faster, and new faces walked in with wide eyes and expectant appetites. But with the praise came jealousy murmurs that a black woman from Atlanta couldn't have earned it on skill alone. She must have known someone, they said. She's not from here. And now, just days before the Beaufort Shrimp Festival, a chance to prove her place, Imani faced a blow that threatened everything. It was a Tuesday morning when the call came. The sky was the color of slate clouds, swollen and heavy. Imani answered the phone with a towel slung over her shoulder and a checklist half-written on the prep counter. It was Hank, the old fisherman, who'd reluctantly agreed to supply her seafood for the festival. "Sorry," his voice crackled through the line. "Deal's off." Imani's stomach dropped. Why, I heard some stuff. Rumors. About you bribing some critic. I don't deal with that kind of mess. Gotta protect my name." His voice was curt, final. She stared at the wall for a long moment after he hung up, then slowly set the phone down. Talia, slicing herbs nearby, froze. "Was that yeah?" Imani said quietly. "He's out." The words landed like a dull thud in the room. The festival was in 2 days. No seafood meant no menu. No menu meant no chance to show what Soulfire was made of. Talia swore under her breath, then looked at Imani. "We'll figure something out." Imani nodded slowly, her jaw tight. "I'm going to Charleston." The decision came like instinct. Charleston was 2 hours up the coast, where the docks didn't care who you were if your money was clean and your need was real. She didn't wait. Within 30 minutes, she was packed cooler bins, blankets, a thermos of black coffee. The rain had started to fall as she climbed into her old pickup, headlights cutting through the fog curling off the marsh. The drive was quiet save for the rhythmic sweep of the wipers and the low hum of gospel music on the radio. Traffic thinned as the highway stretched into back roads lined with pine trees and sleepy diners. She passed shrimping boats bobbing in shadowy water, and trucks pulled off near bait shops. At the docks, the air was sharp with salt and diesel. Imani found an old-timer named Reuben whose face looked carved from driftwood and whose silence said more than most men's words. She explained what she needed: enough shrimp, crab, and local whitefish to serve 300. He listened, squinting through the rain. "I heard about your place," he said finally. "Heard the food's honest." He paused, eyeing her carefully. Honest food always has a buyer. He gave her a deal. It wasn't cheap, but it was fair. They loaded the truck in the dark, her hands cold and aching, as she arranged crates over packed ice. Reuben tipped his hat when she left. "Don't let him tell you who you are, miss." She didn't answer. She couldn't. The lump in her throat was too tight. Driving back, the storm built around her, wind rattling the windows, rain slicing across the windshield like needles. But Imani kept going, headlights steady on the 2-lane road, her hands firm at 10 and 2. Somewhere outside Yemassee, she pulled off onto a narrow stretch of gravel that overlooked the water. She got out, rain misting her skin, and stood there beside the truck. The marsh rolled out before her like a living painting, dark water reeds, swaying, sky cracked open. She reached up and touched her fire-shaped earring. It was warm, almost pulsing. She closed her eyes and whispered to the wind, "I'm enough. I always was." Then she climbed back in and drove home. By the time she reached Beaufort, the sun was bleeding through the clouds, a tired gold spreading over rooftops and Spanish moss. She backed the truck into the alley behind Soulfire. Talia opened the door in a hoodie and slippers, blinking in disbelief. "You did it," she whispered. Imani stepped down from the truck bed, her shoes-soaked hair plastered to her scalp. But her smile was clear, fierce, steady. "Let's cook." The town that once whispered now cheered. Soulfire's booth blazed brighter than the shrimp on the grill. The festival was more than a chance to feed people. It was her moment to be seen. Imani Rhodes stood behind a folding table draped in white linen, a crimson scarf tied around her head. The fire-shaped earring glinting beneath the Beaufort sun. The Beaufort Shrimp Festival had taken over the waterfront park. Families wandered through rows of food stalls, children chased bubbles, and the smell of Old Bay and fried corn filled the air. Live jazz spilled from the main stage while seagulls circled above in lazy loops. This was no longer the quiet, suspicious town that had once called her a city girl who won't last. Today, they lined up for her food. She moved with practiced grace, flipping skewers of shrimp over a small grill, ladling creamy crab stew into biodegradable bowls, garnishing with green onion and a drizzle of chili oil. Talia Green, flour-dusted and bright-eyed, worked beside her, passing out plates and collecting tips with a cheerful "enjoy, sweetheart." "Did you try the jollof shrimp risotto?" a man asked his wife. "I heard her peanut stew was featured in a food magazine. I thought she wasn't from here. She cooks like she's been here forever." Imani heard it all, but didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her food spoke for her, bold, warm, unapologetic. The mural she had painted on the back wall of Soulfire now hung in miniature behind the booth, a swirling orange flame dancing over deep red and gold brushstrokes. Celeste Hart had tried one last time to dim the light. Her fan account posted another string of accusations. "Don't believe the hype," one tweet said. "Chef with a sob story. No skill." But this time the town pushed back. Locals responded in the comments, "We've tasted the truth. Soulfire is the real deal. Let the woman cook." Near mid-afternoon, as the sun dipped and shadows lengthened under the live oaks, a quiet man in a navy sport coat approached the booth. He looked slightly out of place among the flip-flops and fishing hats, polished but not flashy, with salt and pepper hair and a thoughtful expression. "Miss Rhodes?" he asked. Imani turned the ladle still in her hand. "I'm Elliot Vaughn," he said, offering a slight smile. "I'm a food writer. Maybe you've read a little blog post I wrote." Imani blinked, recognition dawning. Her breath caught. "That was you." He nodded, eyes kind. "I came the night it stormed, sat at the back. You made me jollof risotto and the yam tart with cinnamon clove glaze. You didn't say a word," she murmured. "I didn't have to," he replied. The food said everything. They stood in the swirl of festival noise, something silent and certain passing between them. "I nominated you," Elliot added. "James Beard Awards. Breakout Chef category." They accepted it. Talia, overhearing, gasped loud enough to make a family turn their heads. Imani said nothing for a moment. Then she smiled, wide, fierce, stunned. "That award," Elliot chuckled. "That one. You'll need a dress." She turned to Talia, who was already tearing up hands floured from biscuit dough she'd been forming. "I told you," Talia whispered. "I told you your fire was bigger than this town." For the rest of the day, Soulfire's line stretched down the sidewalk. Children danced near the booth to Ella Fitzgerald covers, and elders in folding chairs passed plates back and forth, humming approval. A man offered to buy a gallon of stew. A teenage girl asked Imani to sign a to-go box, and the whispers that once stung now swelled with admiration. As the sun set over the Beaufort River, the booths began to close and music faded to soft saxophone. Imani finally stepped away from the grill, her apron stained and her arms aching. She held Elliot's business card in one hand, the other wrapped around a still warm bowl of risotto. She stood beside the mural banner as the last rays of light caught her earring and painted her face in gold. "Let's see how far fire can go," she said. Under the chandeliers of Chicago's grandest ballroom, Imani Rhodes stood in a crimson dress, ready to claim what was always hers. From whispered rumors to viral takedowns, she'd survived them all. Now came the reckoning. The James Beard Foundation Awards unfolded inside the gilded hall of the Palmer House Hilton, where velvet-draped tables shimmered under golden light and soft piano music floated above the hum of the culinary elite. Plates clinked, wine glasses sparkled, and laughter moved like silk through the room. But at a table near the front, Imani 29. A black woman with warm brown skin and a presence that held weight without noise, sat in perfect stillness. Her curls flowed down her shoulders in soft waves, and the fire-shaped earring at her ear glinted each time the lights caught her cheek. Next to her, Elliot Vaughn offered a quiet, encouraging smile. "You belong here," he said simply. Imani nodded, her hands resting in her lap. Across the room, she caught sight of Darius Langston. He was dressed sharply as always, but his eyes lacked the shine they once carried. The music producer, who had stood under bright lights and cast her aside, now sat rigid in a borrowed corner of her world. Beside him, Celeste Hart glittered in a silver gown, phone in hand, lips in a constant half-smile aimed at invisible followers. Imani turned back to the stage. Her chest rose slowly as her name appeared on the massive screen overhead. Imani Rhodes, Soulfire, Beaufort, South Carolina. A photo followed her plating jollof risotto in her tiny restaurant kitchen, the flame mural behind her glowing like a heartbeat. There were polite claps, a few murmurs, some curious glances, and a small knot of skeptical eyes that still clung to the old rumors. The host, a suave chef in a velvet tuxedo, pulled the envelope from his pocket and said, "For Breakout Chef of the Year." Time folded for a breath. Imani Rhodes, Soulfire. The ballroom erupted, a standing ovation, some genuine, some hesitant, some stunned. Imani rose slowly, the crimson silk of her dress catching the light like living fire. Her walk to the stage was quiet and firm, her steps, even her posture, straight. When she took the glass, flame-shaped award into her hands, it felt warm, like it had always been waiting for her. She approached the mic, her voice low and steady. "I cook for souls," she said, letting the silence stretch. "Not spotlights. This is for every dreamer told they're too small, too different, too late. Your fire is enough." Applause swelled again, echoing beneath the chandeliers. In the shadows near the back, Darius didn't move, his fingers clenched around a wine glass. Celeste tapped her phone screen, pretending not to care. As Imani stepped down, Celeste intercepted her path. "Congrats, darling," she said in that sugar-slick voice. "Let's share the moment." She raised her phone for a selfie. Imani paused, met her eyes, and offered a smile so poised it cut sharper than steel. "My kitchen doesn't serve those who lack taste." Gasps rippled. A few phones rose to catch the exchange. Celeste's smile cracked. She lowered the phone, stepping back. Imani walked on. Elliot joined her with a nod of quiet pride. They returned to their table as the next award was announced, but Imani was done listening. Her gaze drifted to the grand windows at the ballroom's edge. Beyond them, the city of Chicago sparkled like the past she'd left behind, distant, beautiful, no longer hers to chase. Later backstage in a quiet corridor, Darius approached. The hallway smelled of powder and champagne and fading applause. He looked older now, smaller. His tailored suit hung on him like it no longer fit. "Imani," he said, his voice hoarse. I was wrong. I didn't see you back then. Not really. I'm sorry. She looked at him, and in her eyes there was no cruelty, no revenge, only clarity. You didn't dim me, she said softly. You lit the fire. The words hit him harder than a slap. He tried to reply, but she was already turning. Elliot appeared beside her, steady as always. Ready, he asked. She nodded, her award still in hand. Let's go home. They walked out together as the sounds of celebration faded behind them. Weeks later, back in Beaufort, Soulfire glowed with a warmth that had nothing to do with fame. Locals filled every table. Children laughed over yam tarts. Talia passed out biscuits in an apron that read, "The fire rises." Imani stood behind the counter, her fire-shaped earring catching the morning light, as she poured coffee and smiled like someone who had nothing left to prove. The mural flame still danced on the wall. The girl they once doubted had become the woman they trusted, and her fire untouchable. Some say success is about being the loudest in the room. But Imani Rhodes taught us something quieter, something deeper, that true fire burns from within and never asks for permission to rise. In a world that too often rushes to judge by appearance or origin, her story reminds us of the cost of silence, the weight of doubt, and the quiet power of persistence. From the moment she walked away from betrayal in Atlanta to the day she served jollof risotto to strangers in a sleepy coastal town, Imani moved not with noise but with purpose. Every dish she made, every wall she scrubbed, every insult she bore in silence was a note in the symphony of her becoming. And in a ballroom far from where her story began, she showed the world that skill, soul, and integrity can outshine legacy and noise. Her journey is a living echo of a truth we sometimes forget. Real talent needs no spotlight to be valid. The injustice of assumption, the kind that dismisses a black woman as unworthy or calls her success a fluke, is not just unfair, it's dangerous. Because it blinds us to brilliance that doesn't fit a mold. And yet brilliance always finds a way to rise like heat through floorboards, like light beneath a closed door. If there's a lesson to carry from her flame, it's this: never underestimate those building quietly in the corners you don't see. Talent has many faces, dignity has many paths, and justice, when paired with patience, always has the last word, like a kitchen warming before dawn, or a letter tucked inside an old cookbook. Sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin in the softest moments. So next time someone enters your life with hands calloused from the work and eyes full of grace, pause before you pass judgment. Because maybe, just maybe, that's the person who's been carrying the light all along. And if this story has stirred something inside you, take a moment. Share a meal. Share a memory. Or simply share the belief that no one's worth should ever be measured by where they start, but by how they keep going.